Hey, welcome back to my channel. So we have our 7-inch build coming on. This is the first episode, I guess, or first part, or the very beginning of the 7-inch build of my rescue drone. So I'm gonna try to go through everything. The audio file for some reason on this first part is missing, so I'm having to overlay it here, so bear with me. But it looks like the rest of everything came in. So what I'm going through right now is placement of the XT60 to the ESC. So I'm marking the positive and the negative wires to the ESC. I like to get my ESC placed and then put where I'm going to put the battery and how I'm going to hook up power to the quadcopter. That's kind of the very first thing that I do. Because the XT60, the power wire is I kind of build around that because it's such a thick wire usually. And so now I'm just going to place the battery on the top of the frame here, and then I'm going to put the XT60 up, and then just get a good measurement of placement and where I want it. I've kind of fiddled around with this before I started to know exactly. So I'm going in there to the ESC. Before I cut these wires, I want to make sure it's exactly placed the way I want it, so that I can put a strap around this to keep it out of the props. Or a lot of them, they just end up, being out of the props anyway. So this is where I like to start. Just kind of get everything situated and get the power line in to the ESC exactly where I want it. So I'm just going to zip tie it here to this standoff, and then measure again, and then cut. So, but yeah, this quadcopter has been a lot of fun. It's taken a while to get the build video out, just because I kind of wanted a little more interest in the build itself before I put out a build video. But I don't know, it is what it is. I really appreciate you watching, and appreciate you subscribing. So I'm gonna go ahead and zip tie the power line to this standoff. Now I'm gonna put a permanent zip tie on this, which is gonna be a pretty large zip tie to give a strain relief. So if ever I get a battery ejection, it's not gonna tear my wires off the ESC. So now that I kind of have them placed where I think I want them, I'm gonna check again, put the battery on, and just make sure that they're where I need them to be. So once this is finished, then the XT60 will plug into the battery, and I won't have a bunch of wire flopping around, or that kind of thing. So this IFlight XL8 frame is really nice. I actually flipped the arms down under the frame to give me more stack height ability. So you can see there the placement's kind of set. The wires are angled. That's the other thing, doing this, I'm getting the correct angle on the wires. So when I solder it up, the wires are going to be going to the ESC. I'm not going to be fighting it. I'm not going to solder them straight out the back. They're going to kind of come out at an angle. So now it's just a matter of putting the ESC in and getting that angle right. So now I have my positive and negative placed. Now I'll get my ESC in there, and then we'll go ahead and mark it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and mark the power line as the insulation. So right here is going to be where I'm going to cut the insulation, and then I only want enough exposed wire to cover that pad. So now that I've got that marked, you can kind of see here that the wires are naturally wanting to curve away from the ESC. So that's how they'll be soldered. Okay, so I'm just going to cut the insulation here, and then I only want that much just to cover that pad. There's no sense in having more exposed than what you need or not having enough. So before I cut, I'm just going to check again. And as far as the build video goes, I'm trying to yeah, see, I'm going to put a strap around here and keep that wire nice and tight to the battery. But yeah, on the build video itself, I want to have enough information for somebody that's not a expert builder. So if you've done a lot of building and you're watching this, it might be a little bit overkill, but I think a little more information than needed is pretty good. So now that I've got the angle marked and I've got where I'm going to cut the insulation, I'm going to go ahead and take care of that. Alright, so you can see here that I have two pieces. The power and ground is different lengths, and that's because of the curve. That once you solder this up, it'll have that natural curve. And you see here the mark that I made earlier, so now I know exactly how much to cut off so that I only expose enough wire to cover that pad. So go ahead and get this trimmed off and get ready for soldering. Alright, so we got those stripped back and twisted, and now I'm going to go ahead and put some flux. I like to use tinning flux. Has a little bit of tinning agent in it. Get plenty on there. Not enough to, swamp everything, but I want to go ahead and get these tinned up. Now that's pretty important to make sure you got plenty of flux on those wires. You don't have to put as much heat to them, so you're not going to send a bunch of solder all the way back into your insulation. That's one thing that, it bothers me when I get parts and pieces from manufacturers and they've heated the wire up so much that the solder's ran back an inch. I mean, that means the wire is no longer flexible, at the tip. So if you put plenty of flux on the end, I like to get a little bit of solder on the soldering iron. And I'm using a heavier gauge. This solder that I'm using is actually plumbing solder. So I'm just going to get a little heat transfer to the tip there, and then you can see the flux starting to kind of barrel down in there. So now I'm just gonna flow that into that wire. See, just to the tip. Now I'm done. I don't have to flow a bunch of solder all the way down into the insulation, and then that makes your wire stiff, makes it want to break off in the insulation. And you're using fine strand power line, but if you put a bunch of heat on it or you put a bunch of solder in it, then you're just making a solid piece of wire out of it. Kind of defeats the purpose of having this nice fine strand. So just gonna flow that around there a little bit. Now I'm gonna come back and I'm just gonna put a flat edge. I know where I marked my power line. So where it's gonna meet with the ESC, I just want that just a little bit flat. That way it ain't rolling around on me while I'm trying to, put it on the ESC. So right there, I'm just kind of flattening that off. See how flat that is now? That'll sit on your ESC really nice. So we'll go ahead and attach this to the ESC then. Alright, so I'm running about 400 degrees. If you can see that or not, it's 400. So I'm going to make sure my tip's nice and clean. And now I'm going to tin these pads, but before that you got to flux the pads. Put a generous amount, not too much, but you want to make sure you get enough on there. And then just flow. You're going to heat up the pad a little bit. Just put a touch of solder there and just heat that up till it starts to flow, and then go ahead and add whatever amount you need to get the job done. You don't want too much. The ground pad's a little bit harder. It wants to suck the heat away from your tip, but just make sure you stay on it and keep that heat in there. And then once you got it, then you're ready to go ahead and connect her up. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and flow these together. So I've switched my tip to a knife instead of the little round tip. So I got a knife here. So you just want to get on the wire, flow that, and now you see how the whole pad flowed. Just stay on it, hold it still, and then let that solidify. Now the ground is a little bit more difficult because the ground wants to suck that heat away a lot faster than the hot side. So I'm getting the wire flowed, and now I'm pushing that down into the pad. You can stick the knife down into the edge of that just to get that to flow a little bit more. Alright, so now we just want to take a look at the underside. Make sure it kind of flowed around the back a little bit. You can see just kind of checking for heat. Not too bad. I know there's some solder coming through here, so we got a nice flow all the way around. Shouldn't have to worry about that coming off the pads. And we have our correct angle for that to come out the side of the frame like we wanted. Alright, so it's time to add a capacitor. So we'll go ahead and just put a little bit of solder on the top here. We're not going to reflow this pad. We don't want to heat it up that much. We're just going to flow a little ball of solder on top of the wire for our capacitor. Alright, the capacitor wire is pre-tinned, and I put some insulation on the wires, so I'll go ahead and just flow the capacitor into that ball that's on the top there. We don't want to flow the whole thing. And this is a low ESR capacitor. Should help with a little extra help with the noise because we're running a 5S on this, so we definitely want to use the capacitor that's supplied with the ESC. Alright, now it's time to check the continuity on this and make sure that everything that was done right. So this is a good point to kind of check it with the multimeter. Alright, so we're just going to check the continuity. If you don't have continuity checkability on a multimeter, get one. So now we're going to plug this into the hot line in the ground. Now what you're going to do is you're going to see the capacitor charge up. We're overloaded right now. You'll see it spool, and that's the capacitor charge. Now we're back to overload. So that's good. That means we don't have any shorts or some bad circuitry in there. So that's ready to go in. But yeah, if you don't have the ability to do a continuity check with your meter, I would advise you to get a meter. They're not very expensive for a decent one. But now you can see that the wires just kind of naturally want to sit on that standoff the way we intended them to go. Alright, so we'll get our motors set up. As you can see here, we have our 3-strand motor wires. Put them on this XL8 frame, stretch them babies out, and you can see that they are not long enough. So they just need a little bit of an extension to wrap around to go underneath. So you can see each one of them is going to have to be extended just a little bit, but I'm probably just going to cut about that much off of the original wiring and bring my extensions around. So that's next. Alright, so we'll have a continuation video coming up here pretty soon. And I really appreciate your time checking this out, and hopefully it was useful to you.